Good day, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, the occupied islands of Hawaii. I think today is September something, 15th, 2021. A personal sharing today with a bit of an academic title, Mindful Engagement of the continuum that we're in, this thing, life. Mindful engagement of the continuum until the goal is reached. This is a radically intimate theme for me. And I'll provide the context, keep it somewhat short, and share my heart about why it's important to me. Many of you know, those of you who don't or watch this, know that I am in a medical emergency, being diagnosed with an acutely enlarged ascending aortic aneurysm, and more recently with the echocardiogram, the aortic valve is beginning to dissect and bleed, along with symptoms, extreme back pain, coughing, the perception of water on my lungs, difficult to breathe at times. Natural expressions of the aneurysm, so I'm told, and the bleeding. As a result, I'm here in Hawaii to carry on, to keep living, but I'm also exploring a variety of important engagements, including end-of-life care, hospice, the exploration of consciously or mindfully euthanizing, and the process is, I must say, extremely radical, especially this week. I've got numerous appointments, and I bring this up because it really deals with the issue of life and death, and then the issue for me of my belief systems, the process or the continuum of consciousness that we're in, that we are. And addressing the issues and concerns on a relative level of being embodied here in America today in 2021, and also simultaneously living and breathing in the dynamic of an existence that exceeds time and place, location, date, essentially infinity, to state this radical juxtaposition of mortality and human life on a planet, in a universe, in multi-dimensions, in a universe without end, and relative reality versus the exploration or the aspiration for ultimate reality. Okay. So the issue of, I bring this up because I'm asked a lot, especially this week, how do I feel about a fatal illness on an island where the doctors and the hospitals tell me that there's no chance that if your aneurysm were to dissect or rupture, that your life can be saved. You will die. Okay. I know that. We all know that we're going to die. We all know that we will die. We don't know when. This is a very challenging existential issue for me, in that there is the obvious inbuilt mortality by the nature of birth and growing old and living. Everything comes and has its moment or its season, and disappears or fades into the topography of the total, the whole. But equally here, there is this diagnosis, and those of you who equally have such terminal illnesses, terminal diagnoses, will understand. And those of you who have a very refined existential feel will equally understand that being told by the medical establishment and by conventional pundits of truth that you will die soon, you'll die a catastrophic death. And more so, this last week I'm learning that there are not only catastrophic consequences to your condition because you've chosen not to undergo this uber dangerous surgery, there are now, which I've learned only in the last couple of days, radical triggers that could rupture the largest vessel in the body, the aorta. And I went, oh my God, how interesting that extreme coughing, extreme sneezing, more forceful needs when you are answering the call of nature, that all of a sudden that added pressure could instantaneously dissect the aorta, and it will initiate the process of bleeding to death inside quickly or within a few hours, and you are forever wrapped in the river of the mind stream, going wherever your karmic impressions and circumstances and the laws governing this deep embeddedness that we are in, regardless of our beliefs, will take you into the next dimension. I use the word continuum, and I've been bringing it up to doctors and nurses and hospice and people when they ask about how do you feel about a terminal diagnosis, that there's no medical intervention here to prolong or save your life. How do you feel? And it's interesting to me that I have, and I know this is not about denial, I've never in my life felt better physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And it comes back to this word, mindful, this phrase, this mindful engagement of the continuum of consciousness until the goal is reached. And I was sitting last night drinking wine and doing what I normally do, and I'm just dancing along the landscape of creativity and intuition. And yes, mind, that's the definition. That's the operative Dharma life synonym, mindful engagement of the continuum, that process that we're in of cognition, the issue of mind, the mind stream. That is why I have entered the spiritual life. That is why I explored psychedelics. That's why I've explored meditation and yoga. That's what brought me to a monastery in Burma. That's what brought me to Buddhism. That's what keeps me active in my Dhamma, in my Dharma, in my mindful engagement of the continuum of consciousness. Because continuum is this flow of interrelated elements that are so tiny and imperceptible that upon first glance it doesn't look that there are differentiations. And it's just this kaleidoscopic, lawfully engaging, moving in all directions forward simultaneously, this thing called continuum, without centrality, this massively microscopic mind stream on one level, and a very visible life, mind, physical interrelatedness flow stream of life. But what is the reality of this continuum, such that the Buddha had said that enlightenment, nibbana, was the absence of death? It wasn't immortality, but it was the end of engaging the conditions within the continuum that led to the continuum moving forward in such a way that it led to suffering, anguish, stress, anxiety, and the suffering of death. But at a deeper level, a deeper reality, there was no self, there was no time, there was no place, event, there was no gender, there was no country, there was no death and dying. They were deeply embedded, cognitively, culturally, spiritually sanctioned imprints within the mind stream that, if identified within the hallucination of that ideation, you live and breathe based upon the associations within that mind stream illusion. If you believe in death, there'll be death like that. But the Buddha said if you can decode the grasping to false views within the mind stream, you can decode delusion from the continuum. Decoding delusion from the continuum. Mindfully engaging the extraction of wrong associations within the hallucination of the continuum, such that you consciously remove suffering from the stream, till eventually, as a candle or a fire goes out, the continuum of consciousness will vanish like a snowflake melting in thin air, like a whirlpool in water or in the ocean. When the momentum for that whirlpool ceases, the whirlpool disappears. It never existed except in momentum, a continuum of elements, the continuum of consciousness. So I don't really see my life. I don't know about you. I'll come to the end here in this little rave. I don't know about you, but I don't really see my life as ending upon conventional immobility, discontinuity, i.e. death. And so there's not a sense of fear, especially, to state the obvious, but often unexplored, the passions engaged within the stream or the continuum, living so adventurously on purpose, mindful engagement, purposely venturing into the stream and discerning the wisdom of how to relate to the continuum to reach the goal. For me personally, as a traditional Buddhist, a son of the Buddha, metaphorically, I do believe through my meditative practice that's confirmed the lawfulness of engaging the continuum towards an existential outcome, if you will, called nibbana. The extinction, beautiful concept, the extinction, the absolute removal of the continuum within the stream, the momentum of delusional habit. So rad that there is a training brought forth by nuns and monks over many, many, many millennia that delves down microscopically, if you will, microscopic awareness. That's the beauty of meditation, and to me, the beauty of the Buddha's Dhamma, as I understand it as a humble child in the sasana. A microscopic attentiveness to the mind stream. To study the machinations of that continuum with deliberate mindful engagement, to tease out of that continuum deluded impressions and behaviors that only lead to the ongoingness of the continuum without arrival at the goal of the stream. Do you have a goal? Do you have a goal? That's your choice. For me personally, my life has been an adventure to discover purpose, meaning, and goal. To me, the goal of existence, and I use this word very, very rarely, is nibbana, enlightenment, extraction of deluded propensities within the continuum, extraction and relaxation of proclivities that lend towards convoluted dynamics within the continuum. I mean, just pause. I mean, we talk about the mind. Dhamma in life to me is the action of engaging consciousness as wisely as possible to learn its nature, its functions, its attributes, its characteristics, its lawfulness, its causality, its interrelatedness from the purpose of what relieves self-generated suffering within the continuum and what liberates the continuum into its most radiant expression of freedom. And the goal for me is inhabiting mind stream with adventure, that passionate, wild willingness to live outside of the conformity of the walls, of dogma, of the seduction of wealth, safety, security, beauty, comfort, continuity, adventure, the willingness to take risks in your continuum. This continuum isn't a concept. It is everything, everywhere, in all ways, already, here we are. Just a little bit of meditation, a little bit of the psychoactive substance, and next thing you know, oh my God, I am awake within the continuum. But the difference here of mindful engagement towards a goal is the willingness not to participate in the habit pattern of culturally or spiritually or politically sanctioned forms of normality, conveniences. You are willing to be rad, discerning, independently willing to stand in beauty despite the crucifixion. Adventure, and then artistry. It's so cool to see young boys and girls and women and men and older gentlemen and older women who still embody actively in their own humble, broken, beautiful way, style, artistry. When I use the word mind stream or continuum or mindful engagement, microscopic goals, there's a type of masculinity and surgical role of these concepts, but it's really cute and intimate and vulnerable and sexy and erotic and romantic and curious and just tender and art and style. Art and style, the wildness of your own creative uniqueness within the continuum. As we mindfully engage, we playfully, with purpose and with style and with satire and with humor. Like, you can't believe the new material I'm finding in this book that I'm writing along with the film Raw War. I've got this new title coming up. It's called Dead Man Walking, Freedom Never Dies, blah, blah, blah. But the subtitle is 10 Life Lessons in Facing Death, and with a comma, and not giving a F-U-C-K. And the funny thing about it is that I'm not pretending. And it's like, it's really kind of interesting to me to see medical professionals and hospice workers. God, you're like happier than I am. How did you pull that off, man? You got this fatal illness. You could die at any minute. You could, and it's not going to be pretty. Even morphine won't mitigate the pain. And now that you know that you could cough violently, or you sneeze and you're sneezing fits from your traumatic brain injury when you were a child, and there's been some kind of malwiring with your frontal cortex and your nose, and you could die. You could die any moment, every sneeze. And you go like, just learn that. Now that's going to be fun, on how to overcome the sneeze to exacerbate the aneurysm. But quite frankly, it's like I'm into continuum consciousness, not into living in the fidelity of a conventional beginning, middle, and end of a life. And so my joy and wealth and status, I don't know about you, is not placed in my age, my accomplishments, or my longevity. I just don't feel it. And I haven't felt it for a long time. And now that there's been this diagnosis, it's become more, quote, woke in me, that these are deeper feelings that I've had for decades, and they're maturing because I can feel now, wow, I'm in this concept called not just artistry and adventure, but they ask, how do you take the death out of the continuum then? I say, by reversing your conceptual or your language-based relationship to it. For example, I have replaced aging, dying, and death with rebirthing. Just an incessant, microscopic, nuanced, which again is a synonym for mindful engagement, rebirthing, consciously engaging continuum with the attributes of releasing, sculpting, and shaping the being in process that you are becoming in the continuum towards your desired goal. The Buddha was said to have had the goal to be a Buddha. There are other chief disciples, women and men, who had aspirations known as aditants, to become the chief disciple of the Buddha, male and female, chief in psychic powers, chief in wisdom, chief in eloquence, chief in renunciation, chief in patience, chief in kindness. There's just so many ways in which we can aspire. That aspiration within the stream is called an aditant. The practice for me, I just share it with you because it's a personal sharing, of cognitive, request of subconscious and substrata and the primordial roots of timeless being, making a truthful statement. I aspire to achieve full awakening, full enlightenment, nibbana, in my next lifetimes with the Buddha, to be Maitreya, and the reunification with my samsaric sangha. I'm sharing again personally with you, but I'm just openly, to then take birth in a Buddha sasana. There's something so fascinating about, people who talk about having been to Burning Man and really loving this, and talking about great rave parties and talking about great events. To be, those of you who traditionally study with classical Buddhist teachings, the rave to be within a Buddha sasana, the collection of intersecting elemental cognitive streams together, not just your own continuum, but the continuum of other celebrities within existential totality. Cognitive spiritual savants, a gala of radical behaviorists and existentialists, not just psychologically competent people who are existentially somewhat brain dead, but an integrating expansiveness. And that samsaric sangha within a Buddha sasana as the ultimate imagination that I have to be reborn in a field of other men and women or entities and deities and beings where the delight in co-creative, fascinating, enlightening structures of being, the psychic intuitive in full creative splendor, the duplication of forms, the creation of magic, the actualization of deliberate miracles within miracles, and the concentric creation of miracles expanding out of miracles. I was walking on the beach yesterday, and just the divine nature of physicality with these dramatic clouds and the oceans, and there were the turtles, and there were people walking, and then there was this half rainbow, and you could feel the rain, and you're walking in the psychic, intuitive, elemental nature of earth plane. And my fascinations are to do that within Deva and Brahma and in the field of cognitive luminosity known as a Deva within the Buddha sasana, and the achievement of the goal. How interesting it would be, how compelling it would be to know that you have, mad as it is to say this, but I think it's radically important to be mad to fulfill the vision of authenticity and realness in the quest of your own mystical adventure. You have to be not just a bit mad, but really wildly mad, because convention and the gravity and the Velcro of culture keeps you kind of stuck in a performance act of tiring structures of regularity, just the boredom of that. But adventure and mysticism and the dimension of the psychic intuitive and the splendor of teachings that result in the absence of fear. That the fear molecule, the fear facets of the continuum have now been relaxed. These might sound like very lofty ideals, but those of you who've been meditators or who are meditators, especially nuns and monks who've spent a considerable amount of time with talented teachers, Kalyanamitas. I'm not trying to bring anything special to me. But they live and abide and occupy continuum pre-birth, while living, post-death. They live in mind stream as vocation. They don't identify particularly with being in this life alone. Optimize what we can in this life to mindfully engage the continuum. Wisely engaging the continuum is found, as I can see it, in the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha. Primarily found within the Satipatthana Sutta of mindfully understanding the phenomenology of the continuum of consciousness and form, and how to consciously inhabit the continuum to optimize fulfillment of your Dharma goal. Right practice, right training. And So here, in this incredibly complicated week coming to the end of dealing with more doctors and nurses, all by my choice, and hospice, end of care, wills, 5 wishes, advance directives, taking care of everything, just taking care of it all. I've never been more available, more engaged within my own process to truly more and more inhabit the vocation, this is what I want to say, the vocation of my own continuum. And that is mindful engagement towards a desired goal. And that goal is full enlightenment, nibbana, arhantship, the absolute absence of delusion, greed, fear, and all facets attributed to those 3 states of mind. And equally, the radiance of what's known as higher knowledge, abhinya. Those of you who know, the beauty of hanging out in those rare encounters that you've had, that you may be having in your life, that I've had, that I'm having at times in my life, where the radiance of communion, not just communication, the radiance of communion is so subtle and nuanced and shared and dynamic, adventurous, creative, relaxed, tender, luminous, intelligent, vulnerable, wise. We're intersecting mind streams. I dare even use the dolphin through the waves and the way in which they dance and move. But we're in these communion continuums. That's the Buddha Sasana. Communion continuums of consciousness with vocation. You meet someone and you feel a karmic affiliation with her or him pretty much immediately, or within a few hours or days, in which there's negative influences perhaps, or more profound attractive qualities. And you feel that you know something about someone where the imprint, the impression, the reaction is so felt that it could not have come just from this life. We are creatures of multiplicity with multiple formations from time immemorial. Rebirthing, 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 rebirthing. The Buddha's teachings are filled with the stories of multifaceted beings in rebirthing communion continuums together like dolphins in a wave and an ocean. Beings of body in forms and animals and devas and brahmas in this interrelated mind stream communion continuum until we arrive at what's known as a Buddha Sasana, a rave of cognitive luminosity where the priority is enlightenment. How rad, cool. And within that, you and I have been together from time immemorial. There's something so compelling about that for me. To meet someone, to meet people, to be in company with others. You know, call me a little bit unhinged because of this or that, fine, it's okay. But the psychic intuitive and the psychedelic and the meditative and the sensitive tells me, informs me that in my continuum that I could not be who I am without other. The sacredness of Ubuntu, the Bodhisattvic vow. I am who I am through the company and the challenge of intimacy and interrelatedness, relational awakening. And so, my way of processing this new edge, pushing, old Nick Cave, pushing the sky away, an impossible task, only to release and feel the air through your fingers. There's no need to push, co-occupy, live within the continuum, keep aspiring to the goal. I never saw my life would end upon death. The deathless, while we live, rebirthing. And so thank you for being at the edge of my own life. I'm just processing. It's a challenging week. No doubt it'll become even more challenging for all of us at the same time. I've never felt better, more radiant, more alive to the priorities of why I call my life what I do. The adventure of Dhamma awakening towards a goal. Mindful engagement of the continuum of consciousness, the mind stream, this grouping of near microscopic cognitive elements moving in lawful formation through impressions and conditionings and choices. And how well do we navigate this continuum towards your own desired goal, rather than just simply living in the stream? Because the continuum that is not understood leads to the greatest struggles that we could ever imagine feeling or seeing all around us. It's the absence of understanding the mind stream that you're embedded in. Mind creation. By oneself alone does one become defiled. By oneself alone, attributed to the Buddha, does one become freed. It's about the continuum. How well do we understand the facets of mind in that Aristotelian cave? We're looking back at those shadows, calling those shadows reality. And here in this continuum, we're turning towards the light of Dhamma to illuminate reality. And that's the beauty for me of meditation. It's a microscopic dance of mindfulness on the facets of the most nuanced elements within the stream. And avoiding the extremes of freezing or boiling in the temperature spectrum, but finding that right, while we're in Hawaii, that right temperature called nibbana, enlightenment, and the transformation of the continuum into the luminosity of freedom, the goal. Parinibbana, as it said. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Hope you have a beautiful day, and hope to see you tomorrow, God willing.